Police failures exposed by Sarah Everard murder underpin culture of misogyny in the force. Activists say prosecutors would later say COVID-19 rules were used by one of their own officers to detain and then kidnap Everard. Everard is not the first woman to be killed by a British policeman, and campaigners fear she won't be the last. At least 16 women have been killed by serving or retired police officers over the last 13 years in the UK, according to the Femicide Census, a group that collects data on women killed by men, and campaigners feel that tackling gender-based violence is not a police priority. There are hundreds of allegations of gender-based violence by police officers every year. Nearly 700 domestic abuse allegations were launched against police officers and staff from April 2015 to 2017, according to a 2019 Bureau of Investigative Journalism investigation. It also found that domestic abuse at the hands of the police are treated differently in court, with just 3.9% of domestic abuse allegations among police in England and Wales ending in a conviction, compared with 6.2% among the general population.
As fatal intimate partner violence is typically the culmination of years of abuse and coercive control, there is an urgent need to reform the criminal justice system, activists say. And that needs to start from the ground up. Since the complaint was filed, more women have come forward with allegations about domestic violence by police, Wistridge said, allegations that fuel deeper concerns about gender-based violence in the force. Dick apologized on behalf of the Met and acknowledged that trust in the police had been shaken. She said as commissioner that she would do everything in my power to ensure we learn any lessons. 6 years ago, as an officer with the Kent Police Force, Cousins was accused of indecent exposure. 3 days before Everard's murder, he was accused of exposing himself at a fast food restaurant in South London. An investigation has since been opened into the alleged failures by the Met to investigate 2 allegations against Cousins of indecent exposure in February. Another investigation is looking into allegations that 5 serving officers and 1 former officer shared grossly offensive material with Cousins on a WhatsApp group in 2019. A separate investigation was also opened into allegations that an officer taking part in the search for Everard shared an inappropriate graphic depicting violence against women in a WhatsApp group with colleagues at the time of her disappearance. Inappropriate behavior is not new in the force. In June 2020, after sisters Nicole Smallman and Biba Henry were brutally murdered in London, 2 Met police officers took selfies next to their bodies and shared them on WhatsApp. 6 other officers failed to report it. There is no room for police officers with question marks over their previous conduct in the force, Wistridge said. The Met said in a statement that Cousins had been vetted when he joined and had no criminal convictions or cautions, but that vetting is a snapshot in time and unfortunately, can never 100% guarantee an individual's integrity. But it also has a history of abetting sexual misconduct. As Cousins was sentenced on Thursday, a landmark judgment from the Investigatory Powers Tribunal ruled that the Met had violated an environmental activist's human rights after she had been deceived into a long-term sexual relationship by an undercover officer. Senior officers probably had a lack of interest in protecting women from breaching their human rights and privacy, it said. The IPT ruling thrusts the spotlight onto other documented abuses of power in the force. From March 2017 to 2019, 415 referrals were made for officers that had abused their position to sexually assault someone, with domestic and sexual violence victims, sex workers, and drug users most at risk of being abused by a on-duty police officer, according to a 2018 Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services report. Nearly 500 Met police officers were accused of sexual misconduct, including assault and harassment from April 1, 2014 to March 31, 2020, according to data released by a Freedom of Information request. Of the 493 complaints, 148 resulted in an investigation. Violence against women in the force is not an isolated incident, says Wistridge. It's something much more kind of rotten within the system that has to be rooted out. On Saturday, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson described the police's failure to take violence against women and girls sufficiently seriously as infuriating in an interview with The Times. Are the police taking this issue seriously enough? It's infuriating. I think the public feel that they aren't, and they're not wrong, Johnson said. There is an issue about how we handle sexual violence, domestic violence, the sensitivity, the diligence, the time, the delay. That's the thing we need to fix, he said, adding that the government is trying to compress the time between complaints being filed by women and at the point at which action is taken. Rape allegations continue to rise, but cases charged by the Crown Prosecution Service have dropped markedly, according to an October 2020 Victims Commissioner report, which said that in 2019-20 there were 55,000 reports of rape to the police, but only 1,867 cases charged. Plus, the proportion of survivors who chose to withdraw their case is on the rise. And the government's current strategy doesn't fill many women's rights activists with hope. The government has separated domestic abuse from their new violence against women and girls strategy, a move that many say misses the crucial point that women's experiences of violence and abuse are interconnected. Disconnect and consent. Since Couzens' sentencing, high-ranking police have been on a media blitz to signal they understand trust has been broken with the public, saying they will take steps to regain it. They've also outlined measures they believe women should take to feel safer. Women approached by lone police officers have a right to seek verification that the officer detaining them is legitimate, the Met said in a Friday statement. The statement also said that if a woman has doubts about the validity of the arrest, they'd advise running into a house, knocking on a door, waving a bus down, or calling police. Activists argue the police guidance is tone-deaf, places the onus on women to take responsibility for avoiding crimes against them, and shifts the focus away from the real problem: how to best identify and stamp out predators in their ranks. A member of Sisters Uncut, a direct-action feminist group who led the Everard Vigil in March, called the advice ridiculous. She added, "I think the focus of this advice is to make it seem as if Couzens was a cop gone rogue, when in fact we know that he was very much a part of a product of the institution."
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.